You're probably pretty smart. People have told you this your whole life. But right now, you are actively avoiding something important. A deadline, a massive project, or a life-changing decision. Instead, you're watching this video, letting the clock tick down to 0. Why? If you're so intelligent, why can't you just do the work? Here is the shocking truth. Your high intelligence is exactly what's causing the problem. It sounds like a paradox, right? But it comes down to how your brain processes the future. Most people approach a task by looking at the first step. They see step 1. They do step 1. Simple. But your brain? Your brain is an overpowered simulation machine. When you look at a project, you don't just see step 1. In a fraction of a second, your mind fast forwards through the entire process. You see step 1, step 2, step 50. You anticipate the roadblocks, the missing information, the sheer amount of effort. And before you even open a single document, your brain has already experienced the exhaustion of doing the whole thing. You overwhelm yourself with your own foresight. This is known as the curse of mental simulation. If a task takes 10 hours of hard focus, your brain feels the pain of those 10 hours in 5 seconds. So, your nervous system pulls the emergency brake. It says, danger, too much effort, retreat, and you end up back in bed scrolling. But there is a second reason intelligent people avoid work, and this one is rooted deep in your childhood. Were you ever called a gifted kid? Did things come easily to you in school? If so, you learned a very dangerous lesson. You learned that smart people don't have to try. If you have to try hard, it means you aren't a genius anymore. Effort becomes a threat to your identity. This leads to perfectionism. If you start a project early and it turns out mediocre, that means your intelligence has limits. And that is a terrifying thought for a smart person. So, what do? You procrastinate until the very last possible second. Why? Because it gives you an invincible excuse. If the work is bad, you can say, well, I only had one night to do it. And if the work is good, you reinforce your genius status. I wrote that 20-page paper in 6 hours and got an A. Procrastination protects your ego, but it's a trap. Because eventually, the work gets too hard. You can't outsmart a massive complex project in one night. And that's when the system completely breaks down. Now, let's talk about the third factor. The dopamine deficit. Highly intelligent brains are hungry. They need constant stimulation, complexity, and problem solving. But what does the start of a project actually look like? It looks like formatting a Word document, or organizing a folder full of messy files, or writing a boring introductory email. For a fast brain, this is literal torture. There is zero dopamine in doing the mundane administrative setup. Your brain actively rebels against the boredom. It screams, "Find something interesting, now!" And this leads to a very specific type of avoidance. You don't just sit on the couch doing nothing. Intelligent people do something called productive procrastination. You avoid the main task by doing other complex tasks. You need to write a 10-page essay. Instead, you spend 4 hours researching an obscure tangent. You need to do your taxes. Instead, you build a highly complex Excel spreadsheet to track your diet. You are feeding your brain the complexity it craves, while completely ignoring the actual priority. So, how do we fix this? How do you bypass an overpowered brain? The answer is going to sound ridiculous. You have to force yourself to be temporarily dumb. I call it the stupid strategy. You must lower the barrier to entry so far that your brain cannot object. If you tell your brain to write a chapter, your mind simulates hours of agony. So, you don't write a chapter. You tell your brain, I am going to write one terrible sentence. You give yourself permission to create garbage. When the expectation is garbage, perfectionism cannot exist. Your brain looks at the task, write one garbage sentence, and it cannot simulate failure. It says, well, I can't possibly fail at that. So, the emergency brake releases, and you finally start. Once you start, an amazing thing happens. Physics takes over. An object in motion stays in motion. Your highly intelligent brain suddenly has a puzzle right in front of it, and it cannot resist fixing the garbage you just created. You write a terrible sentence, and your brain instantly sees how to make it better, because editing is problem solving, and problem solving produces dopamine. Now, your intelligence is working for you, not against you, but you have to trick it to get past the front door. Here is another way to break the simulation. The 5-minute rule. Tell yourself you will only work for 5 minutes, and then you are allowed to stop. Again, your fast brain runs the calculation. 5 minutes? That requires almost zero effort. Approved. But once you sit down and engage the material, your focus locks in. You rarely stop at 5 minutes. You just needed to bypass the paralyzing startup sequence. Now let's address the identity trap. You have to detach your ego from the output. Being smart doesn't mean doing things perfectly on the first try. It means having the capacity to learn from mistakes. If you never test your limits, your intelligence will rot. Stop treating your brain like a fragile museum exhibit. Treat it like a muscle. Tear it down, exhaust it. That is how it actually gets stronger. And finally, stop relying on adrenaline. Waiting until the last minute forces your body into fight or flight. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. This panic overrides the mental simulation. You no longer care about perfection. You only care about survival. Yes, it works. But it is destroying your physical health, and it leads to massive burnout. You cannot run a supercomputer on emergency backup power forever. So, lower the bar. Write garbage. Work for 5 minutes. Do the simplest, stupidest version of the task. Trick your brain into thinking the work is easy. Once you start, your intelligence will take over. It will fix the mistakes. It will organize the chaos. It will find the optimal solution. You are not lazy. You are overwhelmed by your own processing power. You are paralyzed by a simulation of the future. And you are terrified of losing your identity as the smart one. Let it go. Stop trying to prove your genius by doing things flawlessly. Start proving it by actually finishing something. The world doesn't care how fast your brain works. It only cares about what you build. So shut down the simulation. Stop looking at step 50. Look right at your feet. Take one stupid, ugly, garbage step forward, and then do it again. Before long, your genius will wake up, and this time, it will be focused on reality, not a simulation. Close this video. Go write one terrible sentence.